Cool. Here we go. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for jumping on to the first of our coach workshop series. Where, first of all, thank you very much for jumping on and tuning in and listening to what we've got to say, particularly over Labor Day weekend on a Saturday evening. Obviously, that's a massive commitment, so we don't take that lightly. And also, thank you very much to Ryan. Obviously, he's a busy man at the moment as well, coaching the Melbourne Rebels. They had a big win last night over the Western Force to make the finals, and then coaching Otago to a pre-season victory, 45-43 over Southland as well. So I'm sure among everything else he's got prepared for this presentation, we'll also hear a bit about that, which would be really awesome. So a little bit about us and what we're trying to do. We want to make New England rugby an absolute powerhouse amongst American rugby, and the best way to do that is to develop great coaches, and then that's going to directly develop the quality of rugby that's been played around New England. And Ryan's coming in January, and he's going to be really hands-on, really accessible, and we want to be a sort of a leader among sort of American rugby and sort of taking hold of the coaching scene across New England and providing opportunities to develop as a coach. So obviously we've got a coaching certification available at the moment, as well as things that cost to be involved in. We also want to have things that are free to join in, and then it's accessible to everyone. So with our first presentation here, we've got number one, skill acquisition. So it's going to be from grassroots to professional, a practical guide to coaching the fundamentals of rugby with Ryan Martin. Obviously, Ryan's had a fantastic coaching journey to date, a really blue-collar journey. He's had to work incredibly hard to get to where he's got to. 17 years as a teacher, a lot of primary school coaching, club coaching, high school coaching, eventually selected to coach the New Zealand Schools Barbarians. And then he made a cracking entry to his professional coaching career as well with Otago, and now the Melbourne Rebels as well. And also the Asian Pacific Dragons, Ryan, excuse me. So Ryan, mate, thanks very much and welcome aboard to the Free Jacks. I know the New England coaching community is going to be pumped to meet you tonight. And I just wanted to show quickly this graphic here of some of the great work you've been up to this year, and we can't wait to see it transfer over to the Free Jacks and New England Rugby both. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and let Ryan take over.
Awesome. Thanks for that, TK. I'll just get this share the screen and get into it. Does that come up all right?
Yeah, mate, that's good.
Okay, awesome. Thanks very much for having me. And I just thought it would be a good opportunity to show the direction, that I'm going to be taking the Free Jacks in, but also how I build that direction. And essentially it goes all the way back to just the fundamentals of rugby. So I just want to start with this. There's a couple of clips here I just want to show. And this pertains a lot to basically the presentation around the fundamentals of rugby and skill acquisition within these clips. So I'll just show that this is from 2018 so Otago, my team's in the blue here. We're playing Waikato for the Ranfurly Shield, pretty prized position in New Zealand rugby. So I'll just play this and then talk to it. So what I really like about those clips there is there's something quite special, and it's a philosophy I've always had, which is once set piece is finished, the completion of set piece, everybody should have the same skill sets across the field, regardless of the number on their back. So across that field there, you would have seen 8s being 9s. You would have seen locks being second receivers. You saw a wing go in there and have a pick and go close to the line, which then folds that defense in a little bit closer. So a lot of that comes back to how we train, so that guys actually have the confidence to have those skill sets to be able to play a style of rugby like that. Everybody likes to play width to width and stress the opposition. But you can't do it if the skill sets of the individuals across the paddock don't allow you to do that. So obviously if you've got 7 people that can play that type of game and 8 that can't, there's no way you can actually play a true width to width game. So a lot of the work I do is, as soon as that set piece is finished, I need everybody to have skill sets to be able to put the ball where we want it to go, which is generally that width to width game, stressing teams across the field. And what I also like there is there's some really awesome examples of carry cleans. So there's players right across the field. Everyone's role is just carry clean. And it's an exciting way to play the game, rather than your 1s, 3s, 4s and 5s, becoming ruck inspectors and involved only in ruck type plays. That they get to open the legs up and play with a bit of width as well, which they really enjoy. So I'll just take you through how this all come about. So for me, skill acquisition comes down to 2 things. And these pictures illustrate it. Now, the big difference between these 2 BMX bikes is obviously the trainer wheels right here. Now, this is, for me, as a coach, you have to make a massive decision around how you're going to coach skill sets in your team. So if you were to take 2 5-year-olds who had never ridden a bike, and one started on the trainer wheel bike and one started without, the learning journey for those 2 people on the bikes becomes very different. The learning journey on the bike without the trainers becomes a journey around making mistakes and learning from them. So that there's always going to be lots of mistakes. There's actually going to be a little bit of pain involved in learning on this bike to start with. So every time they make a mistake, they're essentially going to fall off, get a wee grazed elbow, grazed knee, and they have to learn pretty quickly from that to want to continue to play on that bike, but also to learn from it. Obviously over here is a little bit different. So they get on the bike and they get a feel for everything, but it's essentially a fake learning experience in terms of the mistakes aren't there for them to learn from them. So for me, it comes down to how you set up your drills and your skills component within your team sessions. For me, I lean more this way, and I use either time, speed, or distance to put the learning in place around this bike, and try not to have as much as the trainer wheels on, so that a mistake in the session, we actually are getting a learning from the mistake. And we're getting grazes on our knees and elbows, essentially, which is callousing us around our skill development. In saying that, obviously, there's definitely times where we want to scaffold, but there's actually a percentage to sit around with skill acquisition, which looks a little bit like this, where you want to sit in this sweet spot when we're working on our skills, which is generally around 50 to 80% of successful attempts. This is on that first kind of start on the bike without the trainer wheels, where you're falling a lot and they're getting frustrated. They have to actually work out, do they want to learn to ride the bike? And obviously over in the comfort zone, that's when we've got our trainer wheels on. So if we can set our environment to sit in and around here with that 50 to 80%, but there's also some frustration that must be there, and just a lot more highly alerted to the errors. So if we are falling to the left, we understand that straight away that the balance on that bike needs to be more to the right. So we're getting feedback in our errors. That's essentially the way I set my sessions up. With that in mind, making sure that players are learning all the time in and around this percentage of successful attempts. And that's from the grassroots, under 5s, under 6, under 7-year-olds, all the way through to professional rugby teams, which I'll show you in a minute an example of that. I suppose for me, this all came about with my coaching philosophy of understanding that content and knowledge is not an advantage in the game anymore. You can go online and access basically all the content you want. You can go on YouTube, get all the drills. But for me, it's around the how and the why. And I've just got one of my players here, Michael Collins. So when I first coached at Otago Boys High School, first 15, he was my captain, and this is Michael playing for the first 15. And then he left school, and first year out, he became a professional rugby player, and he played for Otago. He's now been a very successful Super Rugby player. He's played for the Blues and currently for the Highlanders, and now back with Otago. He's our captain. But Michael's journey and Michael's way he challenges for me really instilled the coaching philosophy around the intent. So basically, whenever I would present a session when Michael's involved, there always has to be a how and why. He won't accept unless I can answer those questions. So how is this making him better? And why are we doing this? Where is the advantage we're getting from doing this work? So rather than just rolling out a drill without that understanding of how is it making A, the individual better, B, the team, but also why are we doing this? What's actually, where are the holes in the opposition that we're getting the learnings from? So that kind of helps me set up my sessions. As soon as I know I can answer these fully, then I'm pretty happy with how the flow of the session's going to go. From that, it allows me to create a game model. So going back to that clip, you could obviously see I like to play a style across the field, which was lanes based. So you can flush any lanes across the field. There's 5 distinctive vertical lanes across the field. With the free jacks, looking at the profile of the MLR and also looking at the profile of the players that we're going to have, I've come up with a game model which then allows me to put the skill acquisition training sessions into place. But essentially, there's going to be 3 big areas of our game. So attack, kicking, and defense. So they're all interconnected. And then from that, there comes out 3 distinctive areas that relate to those key profiles in our game that is going to be the success of these areas. So around attack, we want to be connected through short passes. So we want the ability to pass fast and quick and stay connected across the field. We want to keep the ball moving. Now, that doesn't essentially mean keep the ball moving in the air. That's also on the ground. So as soon as we're tackled, I want ball movement. And that becomes a philosophy for us around making it as hard as possible for those tackle jackal players. They've got to move forward if they are going to have a go at our ball, and by that time they're going to be cleaned. Keeping the ball moving is also in our kick game. Trapping through carry lines. So that's a lot of mid-space attack. So our running lines are going to become really important. We want to fold 2 carriers in on every running line. So we get a little bit of my guy, your guy syndrome in the defense. Moving down to kicking. So the platform from your kicking, whether it's set piece or an unstructured platform where you create it for your 9 or your 10 becomes really important. Then obviously here, kick selection, so manipulation. In my backlines, everybody must be a triple threat. So it's no point if you do not have a kicking game, most likely you won't be selected in my teams. You must be a triple threat across the field because then we can manipulate space. And interestingly, the first person we always want to take out of defensive system with our kicking game is actually 9. So we want to try and keep him at source. As soon as 9's out, I can create 1 naked backfield player. And then pressure trap. This is probably an undercoached area in the game. What pressure trap pertains to is after we've kicked, can we create 2 negative gain line carries from the opposition on their kick returns? And essentially you can measure that. So the winniness behavior around pressure trap is actually 60% or above. And then lastly on D, real simple philosophies here. I think D can get confused around system. I think intent's more important at the moment, the way the game's going. And it's real simple, staying connected across the field and staying connected where you're comfortable. So not having specified spacings, just connected. The players all know when they're comfortable or not. So they need to be able to make a connection with someone and be comfortable. Slow the ball. Obviously, ideal world is to slow the opposition ruck ball down to 3 to 5 seconds and then filling the field. So we have a concept when we're kicking the ball to make the field big so that the opposition need to mark every little centimetre on that field. The opposite on D is we want to fill it so that they don't have that. As you'll see down here, it says behaviour-based analysis. When I review a game, it is all based on behaviours, because behaviours are the easiest things we can change. So if you come across to this side of the grid, you'll see each of these areas have distinctive behaviours that I can measure. And when we review our game, it just filters back into the 3 key areas of our attack, kicking and defence. So for example, if you look at this one here, land in 2, what that means is once the ball's been in the air from the opposition twice, so 2 passes, we should always land on the second pass. If not, there's something wrong with our line speed. So real simple behaviour. As soon as the ball's in the air twice, we look to land on the second pass at all times. Stay square until the balls move. Really simple. So we just call that north-south. So our body's facing up and down the field until the ball's passed. We're staying super high on the inside. One thing that I'm really passionate about is also the behaviour of last to leave the line. So in a game, you can just go through your team and look at every time the opposition passes the ball and see who's last off the line. Once again, that's a behaviour that you can easily fix, and it's an accountable behaviour as well. So there's just some nice, easy behaviours in there. This is probably one of my favourites around the kick sprint. So for the Rebels, one of my jobs is to look at our first 4 steps. So as soon as the ball's been kicked, I have to go through every single player on every single kick and measure, was that their best effort in their first 4 steps? We also back that up with our GPS data, but obviously at the amateur arm of the game, we don't have that ability, but you can definitely measure first 4 steps from the coach's eyes when you videoed your matches, and you can come up with a team percentage around that. That's a no talent required behaviour. That's just guys caring about their team, and when the ball's in the air, working really hard. But the one thing we do also to back that up at the Rebels is we will put their GPS kick sprints above their head as they're running. So in the review, they have a percentage of their maximum speed, and they must be working over 75% as a winningness behaviour. So across the field, you'll have the team with the numbers above their head. So there's really nowhere to hide. Couple of these big ones in the red are really massive behaviours for me. So put your head in the spokes. As a sentence that doesn't sound very nice, but there are times in rugby where we do have to go to dark places, and that's just guys that when they're cleaning, always putting their head on the inside of the clean, and willingness to go to those dark spaces. That's the beauty of our game. Don't hide behind technique. So sometimes it can be easy to review and look at that and for example, in tackle tech, same leg, same shoulder, but there's times where you're not going to get these things right. We can't hide behind that technique. We just still have to go forward and have an intent to run what we're doing. And then just there's some real easy behaviours down in and around here. Around the outside of this game model, essentially where the skill acquisition falls into. So for me, it's auto response skill acquisition, which I'll show you some clips of in a minute. And that pertains to building a skill sets and reps around our pathways, our neural pathways. So when we're under the most intense pressure, we still fall back to a high level of skill acquisition, of skill detail. This part over here is a way to train, so perception action coupling. The rule around that is whatever skill or drill you're doing, it must have the feel of what that would be like in a game. So it must be realistic. It must have the same feeling and how it would pertain on the field. And then my basic big philosophy up here around selecting your team and your game model is never worship talent, worship work ethic. And that's just an easy way to use as a selection tool. The cool thing about these behaviors is you can see they naturally lend themselves to when you go into selection mode as a coach around what type of skills, behaviors are important for your team. So when you're looking at a player, you start to be able to have a pretty black and white view on, are these the areas that match in with how you want to play the game? What are the key skill detail developments to play that style of game that I showed you from those clips? For me, the catch pass becomes pretty crucial, and it's about passing with speed and power. And within that, the nose of the ball, the shape of the ball to the receiver gives the receiver confidence to play closer to the line speed. So really important that the nose, the outer part of the ball as it's arriving to the receiver, has the nose up at about 45 degrees. that puts that player into triple threat straight away. If it's a back, they can quickly transfer to their foot, so they become a run, pass, and kick option, whereas our forwards can be that carry, pass option and play out the back as well. Super square in our attack, I'll show you some examples of that, just with the way they're ruling the interpretations of the breakdown in New Zealand at the moment. There's a distinctive leaning towards the tackle jackal player who, if he arrives there, is getting rewarded. So what you're finding is teams that aren't staying square on attack and checking defences off, so winning the inside hip space, they're actually allowing that tackle jackal player to get across. Cat flaps and a terminology I use for an offload, which is essentially a down to up movement. So the ball hangs in the air in an offload longer than it would if we were going from up to down. So it's popping our elbow and thumb. So that's the type of detail we get to with that. The session I'm going to show you in a minute is going to be based around kick, tick and tap. And it's a pin kicking session, which I'll go through. But these areas are essentially broken down into the detail that we can train and rep, and falling back to this whole philosophy of putting our skill sets under pressure, so they're auto-responsive as they're doing their skills. Just around our training theme, so when I design a session, everything is around on improving the individual, and then the unit, and then the team. So how do we do that? It's around setting up the session with the mindset, and that's a real easy way if we can show the players a training plan as a map, which I'll show you in a minute what that looks like. But essentially, if they can see the flow of the training visually, and if there's any new drills, if it is written down on a wall for the players before they go out, they can go through that. Then we're not wasting good time having to go through a drill at a lower intensity. So the rule for me is everything's done with speed. We move, we transition quickly into all of our work. This here is creating a competitive edge. So it goes back to competing to win. You would have noticed that on that game model. We must create opportunities for our players to compete consistently throughout our training sessions. The only way our skill sets are going to get better, and that's that going back to that BMX model, we must have that those failures through good defensive behaviours on the opposite side of the ball as much as when we're playing with the ball as well. This is just a really simple wee drill. It's a 4v3, but it's done with an overloaded attack. So there's one player who sits super wide, and all we're looking for here is the first receiver to stay super square, which opens up all the options. So I'll just show you this. So first receiver in, out. Now there's actually a very subtle movement there that the first receiver does. That movement there, just slightly coming in, you'll see he traps that outside shoulder of the D and planted. That's all we look for when we're passing the ball, is to create a heel plant, and now it's game on. Because of that movement, this player can play on the unders line, and we now have our bridge ball opportunity straight away. So just that's the type of detail we go to when we're repping our passing, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. This is just an example from a match. So one of my players who makes a line break, and what we talk about is staying loaded and keeping our feet under the ball when we're passing. It's just a nice example of that. So essentially he throws a 27-metre pass with the nose of the ball up, which allows the receiver not to have to change speed as he receives the ball. And that's just that concept there of don't let them recover when we're attacking. So as soon as we breach, our skill sets must allow no stop in movement. And that clip there is a great example of sometimes you'll get a pass that'll go onto the inside shoulder where the player has to stop a little bit. So we train at speed in our training here so that we can do that in our games there. And just lastly, the easy sell at any level of the game is if you're getting better, then you're going to have intent in your training, the how and the why. And one of the big things I sell at the professional arm of the game is we must have world-class skill sets, and let's get good at something. So each player must become world-class at one aspect of the game. And then the players that do that, then we can continually add in world-class aspects to their game. At the amateur arm of the game, it's really simple. We're just trying to make our players play a style that everybody enjoys, and that's how you sell that concept around being really good passers of the ball across the field. Doesn't matter the number on your jersey, because then we can play a style that everyone's going to enjoy. This is what I was talking about, your training transition. So this is really important for me in a real nice way. I'll just blow this up into an A3 sheet, and it gets put into the changing room. And the players know the flow of the session. So they can see straight away that we're going to start with some check passing. We're going to move there, and then we split into our outsides and insides. And then any new drills are outlined in the yellow on the side. And this is just a really fundamental, easy way to give confidence, so you don't muck around with your transitions and training. So the players turn up. The drills that they know don't need to be listed, and then it just gives a good flow to your session as well. Players can quickly catch up with you before the training session if there's a drill they're not 100% sure of. Just means that the flow and the transition and the speed that you can train at, that becomes a really good cultural thing for your team as well. So you're working hard and fast. You can have less training time on the paddock, and more time with your players, maybe off the field, with your strategy groups as well. So just a nice way, as they walk in the change room, they know exactly the content, they know the drills. If they don't, it's in the yellow, and then they know the flow of the session as well, how it's all going to work. Here's just an example of me working with the Rebels, and it's around the skill acquisition. So here we were working on our pin kick. So a pin kick is essentially a kick pass. So it's kicking the ball inside your body, keeping super square. And what we did here is we worked on our ball drop and balance. So you're going to see the players hop over a small cone with one leg. So that's the balance aspect. And then they create a fist with their non-dominant kicking hand, so that their dominant kicking hand is actually dropping the ball to the foot, bringing it down. So this is just a really high reps, and looking at our auto response skill sets of our balanced ball drop. We'll just quickly go through this. So here's Marika, bang. Because it's into the pads, they get lots and lots of reps. So this is a 4-minute drill, and players are getting lots and lots of reps. From there, we move to here. So now the 9s are going to feed to the first receiver. So the only person not kicking at the moment are our 9s. So there's 2 9s. Once again, we're kicking into the post pads. Another 4-minute segment with lots and lots of reps. They're getting 20 or 30 reps. And the failure aspect in that is that if they miss the poles, they chase their ball. So there's that concept around the BMX bike. So it makes them be a lot more hyper-awareness around completing their skills. Here is now the team aspect of it. So we've gone from those 2 4-minute drills. Here's another 4-minute drill after those 2, where if they make a mistake, we go back to 0. So this is a reps pressure. So they pass across, they must kick accurately through the post to the diagonal team, pass through, diagonal. If we do 20 reps clean, we then move on to our game. If not, we go back to 0 each time. So the success of our kicking is dictated to by the player's accuracy here in our pin kicking. Also, you can see it stresses the receiver a little bit, so you're getting some nice catching reps as much as well. From there, we would there we go. So from there, we would then move into a competitive game aspect. So it's exactly the same kick. And that what they have 2 kicks from the blue area and the white area, and they're pin kicking across the field. There's a box here which we want the pin kick to go into. Now the defense have a pad. All they're trying to do is knock the ball out of the air as the pin kick goes across the field. So this player's fed. Sorry, that's not working so well, that one. And he kicks across for a receiver. So they work in groups of 2s, 2 defenders, a kicker and a receiver. You can see that one there's pretty good. The receiver drops it on the catch though. So that's how I would build a really easy skill acquisition session around our pin kicking. So you strip it right back to the detail that you're going to work on. So that session was ball drop and balance. Then we put it under pressure on the pads. Then we put it under pressure and reps, and then we move it to a competitive game. Here's another really easy, simple enjoyment aspect here. This is with a young group of under 15s at Otago Boys High School. And all we're working on here is staying connected through passes. And we didn't want the players to reload. So we want them to catch it in the middle of their body and get it back to the receiver and holding their feet at the same time. Once they've completed their reps, they must be disciplined and drop the ball and move once to the left. So there's also a thinking aspect here. So I'll just show you this. So we're working on our hand speed, holding our feet as we come back. They're actually racing the team just in behind them there as well. So there's a competitive aspect. Short, sharp passes, no reloads. Heaps of reps, heaps of movement. And you'll see something pretty special happen in a minute. So this is under 15 group. This is the first 15 players come to help out. What he does there is, the standard was if you don't complete that pass, you must go back and do the second one, which he does there. So just a really easy way of repping a pretty crucial skill. If you want to play hard and fast, you need to be able to have a non-reloaded pass. This is the Rebels. So that was an under 15 team back at Otago Boys High School. This is the Rebels doing exactly the same drill, short, sharp passing. What they have to do is come forward, and you'll see poles here. They must finish after the pass, slightly brushing the pole with the inside of their hip. So what we're working on here is our check passing. Now, this is one of the first times I'd actually worked on this drill. And what you'll see is the ball goes up and down, what I call W passing. What we want to work on is keep it linear. So the ball shouldn't move as it goes across the line. The space pressure on the team is this line here, which essentially is a cliff face. So they must get the ball gone out of their hands before the cliff face, and they must finish disciplined with an inside hip check on the pole. If not, we go back to zero. So they've got to, for this session, I think it was just a completion of 20 reps across and back as one, with that detail. And it's an easy way to smash them as well around behaviours. Bang. So you can notice. And just a slight line change to make sure that they're finishing on that pole. So they stay square on the middle. What you're going to see coming up is Big Izzy here is going to finish on a bad line. So watch him fall under the pole. So I come and blow it up. And we have to start again. Now, this is a professional rugby team, and as simple and rudimentary as that drill is, you can see they struggled at the best of times keeping it linear across the face. This is early in pre-season. Now, when we start this drill, 3 minutes, we'll get 100 reps of that easy, and the ball stay pretty much linear across the whole face, which means in rugby terms, we can play really short, sharp tip type passing profile with our forwards, but also with our backs staying connected on the edges and power passing. With your backs, you can obviously move these poles out if you're doing it specifically for a back session. But this is just a nice way to start training. You roll out on your poles, and each week you obviously try and get better. So you might start with 20, and then you get to 30. The player's ear is always take them back to zero, so then the pressure is on themselves, and you're just obviously counting and watching the behaviours as you finish. Once again, very enjoyable, simple and fun drill with a professional rugby team. This is just something I wanted to show you around, especially in pre-season, how I'd set up a session around our skills. And what you'll probably notice is everything is timed. So the water station is timed in the session. That is a behaviour that we can work with our teams around our transitions. So when a drill finishes, if we move quickly and efficiently as a group to our water, and we have 3 minutes as a group, we get our feedback then from the coach. So we're not coaching on the run as such in the drills, and then we move again. So everything's timed, and you can shut down the water stations if you're not happy with the transitions. So it's really important that we move quickly and efficiently as a whole unit, even to our water stations. So what a basic session for me is, you would have 6 minutes on the detail, and then you'd put it into hidden in a conditioning game. So if you're working on your short, sharp, connected through passes, you design a game that has a conditioning element around that. It could be 12 on 12. with offside touch, where you drop one player each time the D lose a player on a touch, and they must stay connected across the field. Water station, then next one, so you might be focusing here 6 minutes on your running lines. So you could be doing that check passing, and then put check passing into a conditioning game as well. Bang, water station, and same thing there. What we always finish with is a whole team, depending on your numbers, if it's 12v12, 10v10, 15v15, but a competitive game that encompasses the 3 detailed skills you are learning for the session. That goes back to the BMX bike. So we're having our failures here, and then we can put all of them into here and see if we've made some progressions, if we got better at one thing that we're focusing on in that session. And for me, that's a really succinct session. Essentially, it's around 70 minutes, and your transitions are a learning point as well within the session. So being able to move quickly and efficiently as a group to your water stations. That's the end of it. And I think that's all recorded so people can go through. But if there's any questions or anything, fire them through.
Feel free to just type through questions too if you don't want to speak. And while we wait for questions, I know, Ryan, perhaps we can touch on some of the plans towards next year. I know that we've got intention from January upon your arrival, mate, to start touring New England and getting really cold face across, all of New England. So if you are keen to, have us along for a session, see what you guys do, totally reach out regarding that. And obviously with our training too, Ryan, we're an open box, so we're more than happy to have coaches come along and observe training sessions and ask questions after and stuff of that nature. If you want to touch on that, mate.
Yeah, so that's one of my big things, is just having that open door policy. So that's from everything. That's all our sessions. That's game day. Coaches who want to learn coming and sitting with the coaches on game day to hear the way we talk to the team as the match is progressing. That's where I got all of my biggest shifts around content knowledge. When I was starting out, I'd just go to all the Otago trainings and fill the drink bottles and listen to the way the team was addressed, and watch the drills and the developments. And I found that was my best way for me to learn. So wherever possible, anyone can come to any of our sessions. And obviously I want to move the team around a wee bit as well and train with some of our grassroots clubs. And I think there's a lot of learning in that as well, seeing the transitions and the knowledge and the way the team speaks with each other as we go. So that's going to be one of my biggest things. It was very successful in Singapore with the Asia Pacific Dragons. We actually train with the club teams. So we every week we train with a different club team. And essentially it was body on body, and the club teams got a lot from it. Obviously they were training at the level that we were at, which helped them as well around their progression. So that'll be a big part of what we do as well.
I have a question about how you kind of toggle that, the training wheels aspect of your drill. So you mentioned that with the Rebels, the beginning of preseason, they're doing that drill. It takes them 10 minutes to get through. I forget how many reps, but later in the season, they've got it kind of down pat. Are you mainly changing the goal? Or are you changing the pressure that the players are under? Or what's the knob you're kind of using to adjust to hit that like sweet spot of failure rate?
So generally, the first pressure point I'll put on them is just distance. So wherever the cliff faces that they have to complete that pass by. And then the second one would be a reps element, so 20 or 30. Then the third one, where we are now, is instead of the poles, we'll have live defenders. So they come through and check those defenders off and push through the seams to then create a second touch. So it's just building firstly the behaviours with the pressure being no defence, but based around that time or speed or a rep. And then once we've got to the point where we think we're nailing that aspect, then you'll put live D in front of them. And then they can start to read some body shape as well. So essentially, if we went 3 lanes across, and that third defender's inside shoulder was facing out, I'd expect that third player just to punch through that hole now. So it's just getting the behaviour nailed first of obviously the linear passing concept, and then checking off, and then they can start to read the shoulders. So you give them lots and lots of pictures of that.
Gotcha. So skill acquisition kind of at the forefront, and then later on a little more decision making under pressure.
Yeah, totally. So I always like to compare it to when you first learn to drive a car. So when you first get in, you kind of look at every element, the steering wheel, the clutch, the accelerator, the brake, let alone even looking into the mirrors on your car. And then if we can nail that, and that becomes auto-responsive, so we can just do those behaviours without having to think about them, then we can start to look. And that's essentially what those drills set up is we get comfortable using the clutch, the accelerator, and the gearbox without thinking about it. And then we start to look for things, which is essentially using the mirrors in the car. So then you put D in front of them, and they start to see, well, do I need to check this player off because his inside shoulder's out? So no, I don't. But we've got to nail those responsive skill sets first. There's no point trying to start looking for things if you can't actually action the behaviour.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
Rhino, I've got one for you here, mate. A lot of people won't be aware that you had a pretty cool journey through the high school coaching ranks in New Zealand with Otago Boys High School, which was a school that Richie McCaw and Byron Kelleher, a couple of players of note, went to, coaching Otago Boys who were going through a bit of a down patch to taking them back to the top four. I think the last time they'd actually made the top four was when you had played on this captain the team with Richie McCaw in it, playing halfback for them. But what were the things you found at the high school level that really carried over? What were the key fundamentals that you found? If you hammered these things home, you found that you were really successful as a team at that level?
Yeah, so the first massive behaviour was carry clean concept. So if your team, we spend a lot of time on breakdown, and because that's the most happening occurrence in a match. So if we could be super confident, be one of the best breakdown teams, then essentially we're going to win 80% of the match because that's where the game's played. So we had a concept around putting yourself into 30 battles across the field. So anytime you came into contact with the opposition, that was counted as a battle, and we would measure that. So if every player was trying to find 30 and win at least 70% of those battles, then that was a winningest behaviour for our team. So that was probably the first one. In terms of a game profile, we kept it pretty simple, having limited resource in terms of the players and their skill levels. Essentially, we just played a very simple same way, so 12 up, 8 up, 2 up, but that gave us 3 distinctive breakdowns across the field and then width to come back across it. And it was because we're so good at the breakdown, essentially there's 3 breakdown points where you're beating the opposition and then you have the width to play back on. So we kept it pretty simple around that. And then we obviously started to build the width to width concept once we had those behaviours locked in, ended up playing a 2-4-2 pretty successfully for about 4 or 5 years.
And for those who aren't aware, 12 up, 8 up, 2 up, are you talking off a set piece, 12 carrying pretty directly, 8 round the corner, and then your hooker on an edge?
Yep. Yeah, so we're totally gain line focused because we wanted to be abrasive and because we'd worked so hard on breakdowns. So essentially just 12 up, straight off 9, and then your 8 up, and then your 2 straight up, which is all gain line plays. So the opposition are backpedaling straight away. Plus you're winning the breakdown, so you're costing them defensively. So we were looking to trap. So as we would approach a breakdown, we would look to trap and fold the opposition in the opposite way that we're coming around the corner. So they're essentially losing 2 or 3 out of their D line every time.
Cool. Any other questions? I can see Justin Hunley in there, Olivia Benz and Daniel. I'm sure you two have a couple of questions you're thinking of. Feel free to type through.
I have another question kind of about the toggling the percentage completion rate for drills. I think one problem that a lot of clubs have, at least in the US, is that the skill disparity between the players that they have is like huge. There's, one guy who's first season playing rugby and one guy who's been playing, since he was 6. How do you cater a drill that kind of is able to work in the skill development of both levels of players at the same time? Is it like, do you split them, keep them separate, or is there a way to kind of toggle or create a drill that will kind of cater to both at the same time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Generally, I would keep them together, and then the drills. So those 2 examples I showed with the under 15 team and the Rebels, as you can see, that the fundamental of the drill is very simple. Essentially, you're passing the ball less than 2 meters. So in terms of a base level, you would hope everybody could access a 2-meter pass. Then where you can challenge your players that are obviously so that's the base level for the players that are accessing the game. Where you challenge your players that can do that easily is then you can really smash their behaviours. So you might recognise as that player's coming forward or they're now involved in that linear passing, you can really smash them around, holding their feet, their reload, the shape of the ball to the receiver. Whereas I wouldn't touch on those aspects with the players that weren't so good at it. I'd just worry about that one behaviour, which is checking that pole, or in that other drill with the under 15 team, catching and just passing back quickly. Whereas my better players, I'd cue them on the run. So I'd say, nose a ball, shape a ball to a receiver. So they're getting that type of feedback and that they're smashing those behaviours. So that's, I definitely keep them together because I think the better players will lift the ones that are underneath them. But you as a coach, that's where the gold from you is around that how and why. So how do you make the guy who's a little bit better inside that drill get better at what you and create a better behaviour from themselves. So the fundamental of the drill is check passing, but there's things that you can cue those better players on to challenge them and frustrate them as well.
Makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
Ryan, Josh Yankel's asked, is there a good resource to get additional examples of those profile behaviours that you showed earlier? I know that you've been involved with the rugby site in the past, and maybe even it might be teams where you're watching the behaviours of those teams, potentially even the Rebels that you're coaching at the moment.
Yeah, so those profile behaviours are what I made up around what I believe is important in the game. And that's probably the cool thing about that is, as a coach, you can access what are the most important things and how do you want to play the game. And if you want to play the game a certain way, what are those behaviours to be able to do that? So they were just ones that I made up. Like that game model was basically essentially what I believe at the time is important in rugby, and that'll change next year. Every year my game model changes and the profile behaviours change as well. But they're the ones that I'm going to use, having looked at the MLR and looked at the Free Jacks as well and trialled them with obviously other teams. So they're continually tweaking. I'd imagine by January next year, some of them, I'll throw some of them out once I sit down with my leadership group and the other coaches. And ideally at the moment, those profile behaviours, there's too many of them. So that's a document in the working. I'd like to get down to maybe just 3 distinctive ones for each of those areas. And that's kind of the big thing that I've learned around keeping things just continue stripping stuff back. So it's so simple, so that when you play, there's 15 people on the field doing everything with intent rather than 7 that know and 8 that don't. So that's probably my biggest learning with any rugby team is having 15 people on the field and they can do their role really well because they know exactly what it is they're meant to do. So they do everything with intent. And that's the best teams in the world do that, regardless of level.
Cool. That's awesome. If we don't have any more questions, I'll just share my screen here one more time while any more come through. But Ryan, thanks so much for a really clear and concise presentation on skill acquisition. Some great takeaways there, and the first of many things that are going to be available to our coaches across New England. So if there are things you'd like to see in the future, or we can definitely shape things to your needs. So feel free to reach out in regard to that. Coming up, we have 2 more sessions, one on Wednesday and one the Wednesday after, where we're going to be going into a little bit more of the same stuff with some of our other coaches. and staff with the Free Jacks. And we also have a certification course called Foundations of Coaching. I can see a few people on here who have already signed up to that. So that's going to be going over more of the foundations of coaching, the communication aspect, the leadership aspect, creating a culture and reflective coaching practices. So it'll be really detailed. There's 7 to 10 videos per week, and then a seminar and a reflection activity at the end of the week for 3 weeks. And at the end, you receive a certification called the Free Jacks Foundations of Coaching, powered by Revolution Rugby. So that'll be really cool. So lots going on moving forward. But thank you very much for tuning in tonight, and Ryan for putting together an awesome presentation, mate. Thank you very much for getting involved here.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for having me.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, one more question perhaps. No, awesome. Cool. Thank you everyone so much for jumping on, and go the Rebels in the finals, Ryan.
Yeah, exactly.
Sweet. Cheers all.